All right, so welcome to this discussion. So this one has been a long time in the making. Um, so I'm just straight off the bat, I'm going to explain something to the viewer. So this, as you'll have seen from the thumbnail and title, is a discussion, a round table on abortion from an antinatalist perspective. So everyone here is an antinatalist, but in the antinatalist world, there's a variety of perspectives on abortion. Um, Now, when I first set out to get this together, I wanted to get someone who was pro-choice, pro-life, and then the third one is pro-death, which some people watching may not be familiar with that position. I believe it's relatively novel in the antinatalist space. I'm not sure anyone really outside of antinatalism really takes a pro-death position. Maybe they do, and I just haven't come across it. But those are the three positions I want to have covered. Now, I invited Ramin because he made a video on being pro-life. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So then I was like, okay, we'll get you on. Tejas, I've known for ages. Knows the pro-death position very well. So I wanted to get Tejas on, and then I wanted to get a pro-choice person on, and because I want because the antinatalist community, at least from how I've experienced it, is quite male dominated. So I knew there was probably going to be more men than women. So I wanted at least one woman on, and so I was looking for a pro-choice woman, and basically, for one thing or another, it just didn't happen. We had two pro-choice women lined up, both of them fell through on the morning. So yeah, I was planning to play a sort of mediator role, a neutral role. I'm gonna take the the pro-choice position here, and balance that with the mediator role. So there's a little there's a little explanation for people. So cool. With that out the way, can both of you just give a quick introduction to yourselves, just a bit about who you are and how you sort of came to learn about antinatalism, as that's what we sort of all share here. Ramin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Right. So my name is Ramin, and I'm 32 and doing my PhD in Belgium. If any antinatalists are here, and so I became an antinatalist, I would say about 6 or 7 years ago. I didn't know about the position. I mean, like many other antinatalists, I didn't know about the name actually. But it was during the time that I just decided that, I was in a bad place in my life. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to have to do this to someone else. So I searched for it online, and then I realized that there is actually a community. It was actually a very small community at that time called
Mm,
Antinatalists. We just had started the Discord channel, I remember. There were like 10, 11 of us there. But yeah, it was like 6, 7 years ago.
mm,
And from then I started thinking more about it. I also created a channel, Sophophilia on YouTube, where I make videos on this. Started by that, but I'm now going into other topics such as
mm,
abortion and other metaphysical issues.
mm. And just very quickly, where does the name of your channel come from?
It's just the name philosophy inverted.
Oh, right. Okay. I did not pick up on that. Maybe
Yeah,
everyone else did, and I'm just way late to the party.
no problem.
Cool. Tejas, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Tejas. I converted from child free to anti-natalist. But I was converted by Benatar primarily when his book came out, or slightly before his book came out, because he had a chapter in another book. And it's been a while since his book has come out, and so it's been a while since I have been an anti-natalist.
Mm,
I also, I'm starting to call myself as a non-practicing pessimist because I am like I mostly I agree with philosophical pessimism, but I'm not a pessimist in my personal life like
yeah, yeah.
anybody else. So yeah, that's what it is. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I try to
Mm.
put some videos sometimes.
Yeah. No, I like the non-practicing pessimist, and also what I'll do is I'll put both of your YouTube channels in the description, so anyone that's watching can find them there. Cool. So let's dive into the discussion. So my original conception of this discussion is that we hopefully can. I'm hoping to generally keep it on the moral level predominantly, but I'm not averse to bringing up legal questions about, in practice, what should we do. So I think, I'm assuming we will keep it most on the moral, but don't be scared to take it, start asking legal questions, because I think that might be interesting to explore as well. Cool. So I thought, first of all, it might just be good for each of us to explain the point of view we're coming from, or the point of view we're representing on abortion, because especially with the pro-death position, a lot of people might actually not know what that is. Pro-life, pro-choice, they're relatively, most people have an understanding of what those are. But yeah, let's go through each of them. So, Ramin, do you want to
Yeah, sure.
just
I can
lay out
start.
what you think on this topic?
Yeah. But for me, it's actually interesting because I was also pro-choice, because I never really thought about the issue for a long time. So I thought, okay, yeah, it makes sense. You have to be pro-choice. But then I really started thinking about it, and so the position that I like to have is that when we have human beings, we should give full moral status to them, or personhood. And the reason is that I believe that if we try to basically divorce that concept from those human beings, it's either something arbitrary that we do, or it will something that will lead to some strange and inconsistent behaviors that we do with other persons and human beings. So yeah, I just couldn't make a good, consistent way of thinking about a human being without being a person. That doesn't lead to strange results. So I thought, okay, if that's the case, then it doesn't matter at what stage of human development we're looking at. If it's a baby, if it's a fetus, if it's an embryo or a zygote, it has to be a person, which will basically gain all the moral status that we have as an adult human being.
Mm.
And that basically made the pro-life position.
Cool. And just so everyone's fully clear, as a result of that, do you then think that abortion is generally wrong, or sort of wrong in all cases?
Well, abortion is basically killing an innocent human being, right? So that's the question. So the question that you have is basically turns into this question: is it generally bad to kill innocent people, or are there other positions or other places that we can't allow that? And of course, there are some places. For example, when the life of mother is in danger, we can go into these edge cases and investigate case by case.
Cool. Okay, nice one. Tejas, do you want to explain what the pro-death view is? And I would go super basic on this one, because I think some people may not have even heard of it before.
Yeah, pro-death view. As I understand pro-death view, it was put forth by David Benatar, and I'm going to try and put some logical steps to that. Suffering is bad. That's the assumption on which we go, right? So therefore, we should not bring about suffering. That's the assumption where antinatalists go. And so, if we can prevent somebody coming into existence or prevent suffering of someone, we should prevent. If we accept that, then abortion to me is a rescue of a person who is just about to come into existence. We are rescuing that person from falling into that abyss of existence. That's what abortion to me is. And therefore, we ought to do abortion. Now, in all of this, we are all fixated on suffering, the capacity to suffer. And that is generally what is called as sentient. So, as long as there is no capacity to suffer, um, we are we can do abortion because nobody is harmed, especially that being is not harmed. And because we ought to reduce suffering or prevent suffering where we can, we ought to have abortion if we can. And this duty to do abortion, where we are obliged to conduct to execute abortion, to do abortion, is the pro-death view. It is slightly different from pro-choice in the sense pro-choice is more focused on freedom of the person, mainly the mother, to whether to keep the baby or abort, whereas this is saying that no, you have a duty to abort. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Cool. And so just to quickly put some emphasis on one particular thing you said there, just so people pick up on it, is that with the pro-death view, I'm not sure there's a hard and fast rule about this, but generally the pro-death view says that abortion is obliged in all cases where the fetus has not become sentient yet. And then after it becomes sentient, maybe certain pro-death people differ on their prescriptions there, but generally, um, definitely before sentience has arisen, it's pro-abortion, actively sort of in that direction. Is that right?
Yes. So, if I remember and understood correctly what Benatar had said, he had put, I think, 28 weeks for humans, as a range actually, 22 to 28 weeks, but 28 weeks as a threshold beyond which we can certainly tell that there are interests developed in the fetus for it to have to continue existing. So before that, and that is what in this context we're calling achievement of sentience. So
Mm,
before such interests are developed, and even before the capacity to feel some sort of pain is developed, you can abort, and you're obliged to abort.
mm,
After such interest or capacity to pain is developed, then then the problem is that then we have to think of two moral beings. One is the mother, and another is the baby itself. And then we can't, then baby comes into the moral picture. We have to take that into moral consideration. Now there have been philosophers who also have advocated for euthanasia beyond that stage. In fact, Peter Singer has said special cases, I need to qualify this, that babies who are born with severe disabilities, now the parent should be given the freedom to euthanize that baby. He has not said
mm,
that you should euthanize baby. He said the parents should be given the freedom to decide whether to euthanize the baby or not, rather than the doctors and the state and law. So
mm.
there are philosophers advocating for that, but I don't think that comes under the boundary of pro-death view the
Yeah,
way we are defining. It's only
yeah,
until the sentience is achieved.
yeah. Cool. So I'll quickly lay out the pro-choice position. So the way that I understand these three different positions is that they center different parties in their equation. So the pro-life and the pro-death view both center the fetus or the baby in the equation when they're thinking about abortion. The pro-choice view differs from those two in that it centers the carrier of the baby, of the fetus, the mother, right? So the pro-choice view, it varies in degree between people, but in general, the pro-choice view is that the mother should be able to um uh what's it called,
Bodily,
like, sorry.
bodily autonomy is that where you're going?
No, there's a phrase in English which is escaping my mind at the moment, but essentially the pro-choice view centers around the mother's freedom to choose whether to end the pregnancy or not, to kill the fetus or to kill the baby, right? Now, um in the pro-choice view, that generally is the primary focus, is the choice or the freedom of the mother to choose what she does with her body, whether or not that involves impacting another individual's body that is inside her, right? And when I say this differs in degrees, different pro-choice people will have different sensitivities as to where they're comfortable with that. So some pro-choice people are what is often seen by people as relatively extreme by saying that you can abort the baby right up until basically birth. You know, any time that the baby is inside the mother. Other pro-choice people have a more sort of reined-in conservative approach, and they say, well, earlier on in the development of the fetus, maybe even after sentience has arisen, but still, you know, early days for sentience, then they're okay with they're still okay with the mother withholding the right to make that decision. And and some people, when it gets super close to birth, then they're less comfortable with that, because the baby is more fully formed or completely fully formed. So generally, that is the pro-choice position. The pro-choice position, and I think the key defining fact, the key distinguishing factor between the pro-choice and both of your positions is that it centers the mother rather than the fetus or the baby. So cool. The next thing I wanted to ask is about antinatalism and abortion. So, how do you two see antinatalism and abortion interacting with each other as ethical issues? And has being an antinatalist changed your view on abortion at all? Maybe it hasn't changed. It may, let's say you were one position on abortion, you've maintained that position on abortion, but maybe it's slightly tweaked the nuances or something like that. Or maybe you've completely changed your view. Tejas, do you want to go first on this one? So, how does antinatalism and abortion interact in your eyes?
So before antinatalism came into my mind, abortion wasn't that much of an issue for me anyway, because one, I live in a country where abortion was legal, and two, it didn't really matter. I mean, I was child free anyway.
Mm,
But by the time when I read Benetta's view, I was in Ireland where abortion was not legal at the time. And secondly, this is a different view. So it has changed from being sort of on the boundary of pro-choice to not bothered much, to now very passionately pro-death. Like, yeah, you have an
mm.
obligation to get abortion. That's the impact antinatalism has had on this view for me.
Cool. Okay. And Ramin, what do you think?
Um, I guess antinatalism didn't change my position. Of course, it brought up the issue because it became important as we became antinatalists to think about it, whether it's legal, whether it's moral to bring someone or abort someone. Um, but something that did change, I guess, after the antinatalism is that the pro-choice position actually became less probable for me, because I guess if you're pro-choice and antinatalist, for me naturally leads to pro-death. So now the polarity in my mind is basically between pro-life and pro-death, and pro-choice seems something in between that I cannot make sense of it. But in general, no, I wouldn't say that it changed my position on it, because I was antinatalist basically when I turned from pro-choice to pro-life.
Mm. So for me, since becoming antinatalist, like both of you, it's brought up, it's resurfaced the topic of abortion. Um, and I would say for me personally, since becoming antinatalist, the my views on abortion have shifted more towards pro-death as well. Now, we will get in later in the discussion to the nuances of this, but pro-death, as Tejas was saying, is generally before sentience arises. That's where the pro-death position really sort of has its substance. But after sentience has arisen, there's still a conversation to be had there, and that is the point that I am still unsure about what I believe. But becoming antinatalist has made me think that there's a possibility that in the early stages of sentience having arisen, when it's still in quite a minimal capacity, it's brought up the question of, is it still okay to abort then, even though sentience has arisen in a lower level? um, Antinatalism has nudged me towards being more sympathetic to abortion in those cases. Um, so cool. Okay, so we've done that. The next thing I wanted to do what I've got is I've got specific questions for each of you, and then I've got some questions for the pro-choice position as well. So I'll answer those. Um, but before we get into that, one thing I wanted to ask, Tejas has already kind of mentioned it, is do you have any specific views on when a fetus or a baby, however you want to refer to it, becomes morally relevant? And when I say morally relevant, I mean, because antinatalists could, could maybe say that, um, the the potential person that we could bring into existence is morally relevant in the fact that we should consider them in our actions. But in terms of morally relevance, I mean that specific individual can be frustrated in some way or harmed in some way at that point when you're making the, when you're taking an action that involves them, if you get what I mean. So, Tejas, you kind of already referred to the fact that you maybe believe that it's when sentience arises.
Yes, but there's a. So you're not asking when do you believe when sentience arises. You're asking when you believe it's a moral consideration, right?
Yeah, but if you want to go into when
Sorry.
you think when you think sentience arises, you can. But that's sort of like a
Yeah.
secondary. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah. No, I just wanted to get it clarified because when is sentience achieved is sort of a medical question rather than.
Mm.
So we are not, at least I'm not expert in that area. So I
Yeah.
take the word
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
people. Benatar has stated it as 28 weeks. Some people have put it as 22 weeks. So there's a range. Um, there is also a law recently passed in Texas, which was based on heartbeat. So the
Mm.
moment you can detect heartbeat of the fetus, that means you consider that fetus as sentient. Or maybe they're not bothered about sentient actually, they just heartbeat. And it's an
Yeah.
emotional appeal that see the heart is beating, so it's an unborn child. And I wasn't convinced with the argument that just because there's a heartbeat, that means that fetus or baby can feel pain or has some kind of interest. So that I'm not inclined to consider that. That was like as early as 6 weeks. So more or less, what I have read is between 22 and 28 weeks where sentience is in some way achieved, and moral consideration is when sentience is achieved. Yeah, sorry.
No, no, no. It's all good. Ramin, what are your sort of thoughts on this?
Well, for me, as I said, for me, it would be the moments that we will have a human being. So that would be the moment of conception. That's when we have an animal of the species Homo sapien that comes into being. And so there's no other point, as I explained, that we can uh, point at and say, okay, that's the starting point, without getting into some strange results or just being completely arbitrary. Because of course we can define these different moments. For example, what can define, okay, before we have 1,000 number of cells is not a person, afterward we do have a person, and that's a very clear cut. But of course that would be completely arbitrary. So for me, the best, most consistent one, it would be the moment of conception.
Cool, right. And when you say the moment of conception, does that symbolize essentially the coming together of the two gametes in terms of the DNA they hold? So when you've got like an independent, you know, genome, um, that will go on to develop a person. It's sort of like when you've got that independent genome that's not the same as the mother's, not the same as the father's, but it's an independent one and it's unique. That's the sort of point. Is that, am I understanding correctly?
Yes, that's the
Cool.
zygote. That's the creation, the first cell of the human being.
Cool. Okay, nice one. Okay, so I've got questions for. I've got two questions per person, so I'm just going to read them out in order. So the first ones are for you, Tejas. So they're for the pro-death position. So, does your pro-death view extend to beyond the point at which sentience is established? So you were saying before, before sentience, it's a clear-cut case. Pro-death, actively pro-abortion. But once sentience has been achieved, as you put it, um, what are your views about whether a mother should be obliged to have an abortion after that point? If you do think there is still an obligation some way into sentience being achieved, do you think that this leads to some questionable implications, such as killing sentient beings for their own good, and risks making antinatalism look dangerous?
Yeah. So we're talking about two boundaries. So Ramin talked about the conscious, the formation of human being, and then the boundary of whether where the sentience is achieved being an arbitrary boundary. Is what he said, right? There's another arbitrary boundary. So if we consider interests of a person, so we subconsciously, even unconsciously, have an interest in continuing to live. And when I say we, I include other animals. So there are some species of animals you can consider which they are not self-conscious. They don't know that they have an interest in living. They don't even have an idea of what being live and being dead is, but they have an interest in living. So that's like an unconscious interest in living. And then in the higher animals, there would be a conscious, self-conscious interest in living. Now, the second boundary I'm talking about is the boundary between the unconscious or subconscious interest in continuing to live and self-conscious or conscious interest in continuing to live. And even this boundary is blur and arbitrary. So, if we have to consider the case where we can euthanize babies or fetuses after sentience is achieved, but self consciousness has not been achieved, we have the same problem of arbitrary lines. And some philosophers have either said that they should be euthanized, so the terminology changes. So before the sentence is achieved, it's just abortion. We are destroying the fetus. We're not killing anybody. Once sentence is achieved, we have to consider that we might be killing somebody. So the qualified form of killing would be euthanizing that being, because otherwise killing involves a lot of pain and so on. So some sort of painless method to kill them would be euthanizing, and euthanizing that baby some philosophers have advocated for. Others, as I had mentioned, like Peter Singer, have qualified that further to say that only the cases where the baby is going to live a very miserable life, you are allowed, or you should be in some cases, be euthanizing the baby. These cases, as far as I understand, don't fall within the purview of pro-death. Pro-death is limited to where sentence is achieved. Beyond that, maybe we should call it pro-euthanizing or whatever view, but that's a view. Now the problem there is, where do you draw the line? Just because at the moment where the baby comes out of the womb makes no difference to this view, because the interest is there in case of fetus to continue in the last stages of pregnancy within the womb and outside the womb as well. And then self consciousness is achieved gradually over the years. So, where do you draw the line? That's not clear entirely, and that's why this euthanizing part, this is one challenge, whether we should be euthanizing them. And second challenge is, to like who all should we consider then? Should we just consider humans? Should we kill other beings? Should we kill other animals? Those are the challenges because of which I don't think they come under pro-death view.
Guess you're muted, Lawrence.
Sorry, that was my bad. So to slightly change to slightly restate but slightly tweak the second part of the question about whether the pro-death view maybe risks us looking as antinatalists, because it's probably uniquely an antinatalist position, is my understanding. It will make antinatalism look dangerous. So what do you think about that? Even if we're talking about just the classic pro-death view of before sentience, it's just the fact that we're saying that mothers are obliged to get an abortion. What do you think about that? That's not really a question critiquing the position itself. It's just, what do you think about how that interacts with antinatalism as a brand, as it were? Do you think it's something that we should proudly wear as a label, or do you think it's something that we should try and keep to ourselves?
So this is more about image of antinatalism, right? That's
Yeah,
the question.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should be very clear that this is a moral position. We are not advocating for any kind of legislation which forces women to do abortions. We can have a legislation to incentivize abortions, which is a different thing than enforcing abortion. So we could expose them to abortion, but we don't have to impose abortions upon them. As far as we take that stand and are very clear that we're talking about moral positions here and not necessarily the legal rights, that should be considerable. I don't think it should be looked as very bad.
Cool. So my second proper question is so in here in London. I'm part of a debate club, and we had a debate on abortion. And in that debate, there were I can't remember if there were multiple people. There was definitely one guy who brought up this point about he doesn't just value sentience; he values the capacity for the potential for sentience. So I will put to you what he put to me, because when we were having a discussion about this, because I said to him, before sentience has arisen, I have no issue with taking a pro-death position, in that we can end the progression of a fetus so that it doesn't get to the point where it reaches sentience. And he took issue with that, because he said that, well, you're squashing the potential for sentience there. And he put this sort of thought experiment to me, which I'm going to put to you. So imagine, you know, a woman is pregnant, and she's going to have a child, and she's been to the doctors to have a screening done, and somehow they can tell this child is guaranteed to have a really good life by our standards, right? Now, obviously, antinatalists would contend whether that's still worth bringing into existence, but if you talk at it from the point of view of someone who exists having a quality of life, it would be a very good quality of life that the child would have were they to become sentient. Now, what this guy put to me is, he said, would you still, if you knew in 1 minute's time is when sentience was going to be achieved, would you still advocate an obligation to have an abortion there, because you are squashing the potential of a very good life to come into existence? And this guy said to me that he thinks that if you advocate for an abortion and prevent that being from coming into existence, he believes that is an absurd conclusion. So what do you say to that? You're on mute, Tejas.
Sorry. Just want to understand the point about 1 minute. What exactly did you mean when you say 1 minute after achieving the sentience? Would you stop? Would you abort?
No,
Is
no.
that
What 1 minute before? So the time frame isn't really important. It's just to highlight the fact that this being is right about to come into existence.
okay?
So it's really just to highlight the sort of immediacy of it.
But the central question is about potential, right?
It is about potential, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm going to try and answer this from antinatalist perspective. So in the question, I think when they said potential, that meant potential good life, potential pleasures, potential benefits of life. And if you look at the arguments for antinatalism, they are based on these potentials. If you look at David Benetta's asymmetry, it compares the potential benefits of life and potential harms of life. And because before coming into existence, nobody is deprived of those potential benefits, whereas after coming into existence, when those potential harms are realized, they are harmed, and therefore it is a net harm. And therefore, even though there is a potential for benefits, it would be better to stop them from coming into existence.
Cool. Okay. So if I'm just gonna jump out of my pro-choice position here and say that's basically exactly what I put to him, and I think some people's values are just so different that one person will consider one thing a reductio ad absurdum and another person will not. So a classic example of this is many antinatalists would say that a universe with no sentient life in it is better than a universe with sentient life in it. Now, most people would consider that a reductio ad absurdum, but obviously antinatalists don't. That's almost one of the key points of antinatalism, you know. So I think that question I just asked you and your answer is one thing where people are just going to completely differ on how they interpret that based on their values. And you know, maybe you can change someone's values. I think it would probably take more than one conversation, but yeah, I just wanted to highlight that there, because I think that answer to us is quite intuitive, but to other people, including the guy I was talking to, he just found that completely absurd and ridiculous, which I find interesting. You know, albeit frustrating. But we have to take the I've forgotten what the phrase is, the swings with the roundabouts or whatever it is. Cool. So Ramin, so if I'm remembering correctly, so you made a video about abortion and laying out your thoughts on it and the pro-life position. And I think in your video you mentioned that you believe a human life begins at conception, which is what you've reiterated here. And it's not just that you believe this in a biological sense, but you also believe this in a moral sense, as you've laid out. So I wanted to ask you that, given that at this point in time, sentience, as we've been discussing, hasn't been achieved yet, so that unique human DNA sequence will in the future produce something that will be sentient, but at the moment it in and of itself is not sentient. Do you believe there's some sort of external interests at play? Because the interest so a sentient being has internal interests of themselves, interests that they can think about depending on the sentient being, or they feel in their body. If a danger comes to them, they don't have like a consciously aware interest, but they understand that that's going to harm me. I have an interest in avoiding harm. Now, a DNA sequence, it doesn't have those sort of intrinsic internal interests. And so do you think that there's some sort of external meaning that's not dependent on sentience, or some external interests that aren't dependent on sentience?
No, actually. There are 2 points that I need to make about that. First is that I'm not completely sure whether looking at interests is the good basically gauge to measure whether something is good or bad. So that's one point. But even if you do that, I believe we have a stronger measure here, and that's logical consistency. So if we say, okay, yes, they don't have interest in that, and then we take that to its logical conclusion and we come to very absurd results, then that would mean that we should change that viewpoint, not in a sense that to claim that there is an interest in play, but rather to say that interest does not matter in this case. So for me, Tejas said that I said that sentient is arbitrary. That's not actually my position. I wouldn't say that sentient is arbitrary. So for defining personhood, sentient is a very good, I guess, criteria. For example, the example of an arbitrary criteria would be, for example, the number of cells, or whether you're inside the womb or outside the womb, is arbitrary in a sense that you cannot really connect it to anything about that person. It's just their location or the number of cells. That doesn't make sense. But when we're talking about sentient beings, then that self-consciousness and the sentient that they have, that's something, a very nice criteria that you can apply to define that person. So I wouldn't say it's arbitrary, but my problem with sentient would be that when you take it to its logical conclusions, I don't see how it does not apply, for example, to adults who are, for example, in a coma and they lost all their memories. Or, for example, I guess we will get to a part where we will start asking each other questions. Like, one of the questions that I have is that, okay, what if that we can extend that period of not having sentient to outside the womb? How long do you also in favor of infanticide? Like, how long will you take that? And so my position is basically drawn upon that it's not necessarily an interest, but because I have a higher rule, and that's the consistency of the logical conclusions that we can get at.
Right. Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, the reason that you are opposed to abortion, even back to the point of conception, is not because of an intrinsic value of the of that zygote itself, or that human, DNA. It's that you have a general rule that you want to maintain.
There's an intrinsic value. There might not be an interest in a sense of a sentient being having an interest, but there is an intrinsic value because it's a person. And there's a continuum of a value from I have a value, my 2-year-old development stage had a value, the fetus had a value, and that zygote also has a value, even though you might not have an interest in life because it's
cool. Okay, cool. So my second question for you is that obviously we're all antinatalists here, and antinatalists believe that it's a better state of affairs if a potential being does not come into existence, right? Now, and we think that because, I mean, it may actually differ on the antinatalists, so please correct me if I'm wrong in your case, but generally speaking, antinatalists take that position because they recognize that coming into existence will impose harm on that individual that's coming into existence. So, given that you yourself are an antinatalist, and if I've mischaracterized why you're an antinatalist, please, obviously, in your answer, just clarify. Do you not think that taking into account the antinatalist position, abortion may actually be permissible in some instances, at least in some early cases when the fetus has, no or minimal perception, that it may be permissible to abort them in the interest of sparing them having to come into existence in a more significant way, so come into existence as becoming sentient, or sentience gaining, sort of becoming more intense, more perceptible. So say, for example, when they first develop sentience, they have the sentience of like an insect, and it develops, and eventually at one point when they're born, they have the sentience of a newborn baby. Do you not have any sympathy for the position that aborting a fetus that is not sentient or minimally sentient actually may do more good by preventing a being coming into existence in the way where they would then not have to endure suffering?
Yeah, first, that characterization of my position, that's correct. So I also believe that coming into existence is harm, basically. But even in antinatalist community, we always create a distinction between coming into existence and continuing existence, right? And you had this assumption in that you started that point of coming into existence with sentient. So if you take the position that the moment of conception you're already in the existence, then the issue of whether we should terminate that problem, then it basically becomes basically goes into this larger family of questions regarding the whole existence of basically living entities, right? So we can still ask the same question for even an adult. As an antinatalist, when someone has a problem, do we allow for maybe specific cases that we terminate their life for their interest? So for me, these are all the same questions because, again, in my mind, there is a continuum. So at the moment of conception to an adulthood is all the same thing. So all those questions that you ask about a zygote, in my mind, I always translate them in terms of an adult. So that becomes a completely different issue, I would say.
Cool. Okay, no, thank you for that. So now I've got two questions for the pro-choice position, which obviously, if all had gone to plan, we would have the pro-choice person here for me to ask, but I will do my best to answer these questions. So the first one is, to what extent does the mother's autonomy supersede any moral considerations for the fetus? So, for example, if abortion is permissible until late pregnancy, what implications does this have for killing children post-birth? So, again, like I said in the start, and this will be the case for every position, but definitely in the pro-choice position, different people will have different sensitivities. My general feeling as to what would be a most reasonable pro-choice position is that there is no issue with having a pro-choice position with the mother being able to make the decision before sentience has arisen. After sentience has arisen, I believe then you have to balance the interests. And I think it's tricky because sentience can be very hard to measure, if it's even possible to measure in a particularly accurate way. So it's hard to understand where in the development of sentience or the intensity of sentience the fetus or the baby will be along the progression of pregnancy. But I think a reasonable pro-choice position could maintain that even once sentience has been achieved, the early stages where, for example, the fetus may have minimal pain perception or minimal perception of anything, maybe they have the same perception as something like, a worm or a slug, or some sort of insect. Although I say all of these things when we live in a world where actually the literature on the sentience of worms, slugs, and insects is actually not complete. It's still a very under-researched subject. But if we can assume for a moment that they have a minimal level of sentience relative to a human or an elephant or a dolphin or a pig, I believe in those cases a reasonable pro-choice position could maintain that despite the fetus or the baby at that point having some interests, those interests can be easily overridden by the mother's more stronger interests, because they've achieved full sentience, and they are completely self-aware, or self-conscious, however someone wants to refer to it. And if done using a pain suppressor, some sort of anesthetic, then abortion is permissible when the mother's interests are in conflicting with the sentient fetus or baby's interests to some degree. At some point, the baby will develop to such a degree where they have strong enough interests and an intensity of sentience where either the mother will not be able to override their interests, or it will be very difficult to. So there still may be some examples where there may be a complication. The mother's health is at risk. Maybe the mother will even die. So there are still cases there, but in general, I think once it gets to the later stages of development, the later stages of pregnancy, it becomes a less reasonable pro-choice position, because it becomes closer to the point where you say, this is just a baby and I'm going to kill them because it's inconvenient to me. So that, I think that's the best answer I can give for that one. Sorry, go on.
No. Finish your thing. I thought you finished. Sorry.
No, I was going to go into the second question. So
I was just wanted to sort of do a devil's advocate on that point, but I can do that later.
Yeah. Do you want to note it down? Because once we go into the part where we open up, then
yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
Cool. So the second question is, so consent is an important topic when it comes to antinatalism. A lot of antinatalists, one of the big reasons that they think it is morally wrong to bring another being into existence is because you can't gain the consent of that being before you do that. And so any harm that is imposed on them is done so without their consent. They're not able to sign up on it. So consent is an important issue when it comes to antinatalism. The question is, would this not lead to an antinatalist conclusion of opposing abortion rather than taking a pro-choice position, as aborting a sentient, or in to some people even a non-sentient fetus, would impose suffering or end the life of another being without their consent? Now, I believe so. If I'm going to answer this one from what I think could be a reasonable pro-choice position, I think consent is an important topic, but it is it is not always the most important consideration. So there are many examples in our lives where we have to balance the interests of different individuals, and in many, if not all cases, one individual's interests will win out over the other individual's interests. generally, without the consent of the individual whose interests are not being able to be realized or pursued in that situation. So, some sort of I don't know, some sort of trivial example is maybe if you're in a car journey and the parent needs to concentrate on driving, and the child wants to listen to some music and they have no headphones. There are two conflicting interests there, but one is more important, and so to the frustration of the child, they're not going to be able to listen to their music out loud in the car because it will be distracting to the driver, right? So this is just some sort of trivial random example that to show what I mean there. So in the case of abortion, I do actually think if someone is an antinatalist, they will very likely take consent as more important when it comes to the topic of abortion than if they were the same person before they'd become antinatalist. I do think consent would become more important. But I think there are still situations where you can take a pro-choice position where consent is something you take into account, but it doesn't necessarily just mean it's a carte blanche no, if you get what I mean. So, and again, I would probably refer back to my previous answer in that consent becomes more important when the interests you're frustrating are more developed or they're more intensely held. And so it would come back to the same balancing act of when the fetus has a minimal level of perception, consent is less important there, and consent becomes more and more important in respecting, not frustrating the interest of that being without consent, as the interests become more vivid to that individual. Again, I think that would probably be the best I can do to answer that from a pro-choice position. So those are two questions for each of the positions. Now we've gotten to the point where I want to open it up for anyone to ask questions to any of the others. And really, please just go ahead and ask any questions to anyone. I'm sure there are many questions that each of us want to ask each other based off what we have each said in our answers to the questions I've asked. So I want to give the platform first to Ramin to ask any questions that you've had come up. And please don't think you have to ask all your questions now. If some come up later, we can come back to you.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I have basically highlighted one question for each position while you were explaining it. First, to the pro-choice. When you talk about the balance of interest and minimum pain and consciousness, again, in my mind, what I'm looking for, it's something that I can extend it to all its logical conclusion, right? So when you talk like that, when you say that, okay, balance of interest, minimum pain, or they don't have enough consciousness, what I have in my mind is like a 10-year-old, and then the mother is frustrated. There's a lot of pressure on her, and so it seems to me that she's kind of allowed to kill even a 10-year-old if we can do it in like a minimum pain, or if he's in a sleep, or in some form of under a drug that has like a low level of consciousness. He is in a vegetative state, is in a coma or whatever. It seems to me that it allows these kind of cases, even in our adult cases, that you can argue in the same way and say, okay, at this time the balance of interest is basically returning to the woman, and now she can actually choose to kill her 10-year-old because he doesn't have consciousness. We will do it in a minimum pain, and now the balance of mother is more important. So what would be the way to resolve those kind of issues in a pro-choice position?
So I think there's two things to say here. And before I answer, one thing I also forgot to say is for example, as I'm answering this question, if anyone else, so in this case it would be Tejas, has anything they want to say to that, they also want to make a response, then please feel free to come out of your own. You don't have to just maintain the pro-death position. We can each chuck in on everything. So the two things I think I would say to your question. So the first one is when we're talking about the balancing of interests. Once the baby has been born and has lived to, if you give the example of a 10-year-old, to me this 10-year-old has gotten to the point where where they hold their interests just as dearly as the mother. And so for the mother to be frustrated to such a degree where it would be proportionate to kill the 10-year-old, like that mother would have to be in an extreme situation for that to be a proportionate response. Whereas when a fetus or a baby has not been born, they do have perception. They have the experience of pain if they've developed that at this point. So they do have interest and perception, but these are not fully fledged and they have no contact with the outside world, in terms of they've not made attachments to people, to things. The only experience they have is essentially floating in a warm tank, basically, just to dehumanize it for a bit, for a minute here. So the experience and the interests are significant, but they're not fully fledged to the point where you're talking about someone who has an experience of a full experience of life, where they have relationships, they have their own personal likes and dislikes, all of these things. When a baby or a fetus is still in the womb, they are limited in the things they can have attachments to. The only real thing they can have any sort of interest in is the capacity to feel pain, really. These sort of minimal perceptions they're getting in the womb. And so whilst I think those are important, I don't think they are important to the same degree as a 10-year-old who has a social circle. They have their own likes and dislikes. To some degree, a 10-year-old may have some responsibilities, all of this sort of thing. And so I think that doesn't mean that we can disregard the interests of the baby or the fetus. It may just mean that they are less important than the interests of the 10-year-old. The second thing I would say is, it's gone from my mind. What was the second thing I was going to say?
The question is on the balance of interest, minimum pain, consciousness.
I've remembered what I was going to say. The second thing I was going to say is when the fetus or the baby is in the womb, there are only two avenues. Either the baby or the fetus continues their progression in development, and the mother has to maintain that, or the mother can kill the baby or the fetus to terminate the pregnancy. Once a child is born, there are a whole other there are a plethora of other options. There is adoption. The baby can be taken care of by other people other than the mother. And so if the mother doesn't want her interest to be frustrated, and those interests being frustrated are significant enough for a proportionate reaction to be to kill the baby or the fetus, then that's the only way she's going to be able to make it so that her interests aren't being frustrated. Whereas once the baby is born, there are several avenues that can be pursued so that the mother's interests are no longer frustrated, but the child can still live. They can still have a happy, healthy life. They can just be removed from the situation where they're frustrating the mother's interest, if you get what I mean. One thing I just want to add onto that is I don't necessarily personally believe all of these things. I'm just trying to argue from a sort of, I'm trying to do the best I can for a pro-choice position here.
And if I may reply to you, so you see, so the problem that I have is that what I said was trying to. So what you have in your mind is that you say, okay, we can, for example, kill that fetus because we have this level of interest, and that can be even zero. We have this level of interest, we have this level of pain, we have this level of consciousness. The question that I'm trying to ask is that, okay, what if, and that is possible, what if we can simulate the same situation on a 10-year-old? He gets into a car accident, completely forgets about everything, all relationships, everything. He goes into a vegetative state, and now he has. That's the assumption of this problem, right? The assumption of the question is: imagine that you have the same level of those principles that led you to believe that it's okay to abort. And I'm saying that, okay, if we are making that kind of move, and if I make the assumption that the same thing is happening here, then I would expect you to be logically consistent to also make the move here, to at least, like Peter Singer say, okay, even infanticide might be okay. Like even if it's 10-year-old, if you are in a car accident, vegetative state, you forgot everything, you're no longer a person, I can kill you.
Yeah.
See, so that's the thing that I was looking for.
No, I understand. I think then the distinguishing factor then is, so if we're maintaining the exact same situations in terms of the being you're talking about, so the 10-year-old is just as self-aware, all of these things as a baby may be in a fetus. I think the distinguishing factor there is that there are a variety of factors, a variety of avenues you can pursue. It's no longer necessary for the frustration of interests of the mother to be remedied by eliminating the child or the baby.
But it is allowed still, and that's a absurd result for me.
Oh, go on, Tejas.
No, you say something on that.
No. I was just going to say, I think it is allowed. It is allowed, but like I said, in a reasonable, from my perception, a reasonable pro-choice position would be that it's only allowed earlier on in the development. So if we are really making the 10-year-old and the early stage fetus identical, the 10-year-old would have to be like really badly, like completely in a vegetative state, only responsive to very simple things. They have no self-awareness of who they are. They simply perceive certain stimuli through, touch or something like that. So they would have a very minimal level of perception if we are to make these two things comparable, because the pro-choice view I was presenting was that the choice of the mother can only outweigh the interests of the fetus in the earlier stages. In the later stages, then the interests become more balanced, and you then can only really consider abortion in cases where life of the mother is threatened, etc., etc. Sorry, Tejas, were you gonna?
Yeah, I just wanted to stress that on that point of vegetative state. So when people are in vegetative state, when they are on ventilators, for example, we today allow them to be dead, as long as we have consent of their family members, and in this case, it could be mother of that person. It doesn't have to be 10-year-old; it can be 50-year-old. We
Yes,
allow them to be.
but what if I tell you that he is in a vegetative state, but it will come back to full consciousness in 9 months?
We still allow if somebody is on ventilator, right?
Uh,
As far as
yes,
I
but
know.
but I don't think so. Like if we have a patient in hospital who's in vegetative state, but we know that is reversible, so the doctors say, hey, we just have to take care of him for 9 months, and after nine
Oh, so
months, he will be fully conscious.
correct. So I think I misunderstood it for the
Mhm.
ventilator case. Then it's a coma state, like he's in a coma. That's
Yes,
what
in a
you mean?
reversible coma state. Yes.
Okay. So for the coma part, I have sort of some points to say. One is that, as an antinatalist, we believe that life is bad, but so is death, or at least I do. I mean, Bennett, this is Bennett's position. I don't know if you agree with that or not. He doesn't agree with Epicurean sort of way that, death is not bad for somebody who is dead. So death is bad, even if you don't know that you are dead after you're dead. And the reason for that, he has explained that, I think, in the Human Predicament book, is that knowledge is not an essential condition for you to be harmed. For example, if you let's say that your partner is cheating on you, but you never know about it, is it something wrong that you never come to know that your partner is cheating on you? But it's still wrong because you are harmed in that way, and in that way you can be harmed without your knowledge. So if knowledge is not essential for you to be harmed, then the person in coma, even though he if we kill that person in coma, they would never know that they are killed. Before going into coma, we certainly knew that he had an interest in continuing to live, and then we are killing him, so we are harming him. In the case of fetus or abortion, this interest was not developed to start with. So the difference is, in the case of coma, the interest was developed and then the person has gone into coma. Whereas in case of abortion, that was not developed at all. The interest itself never came into existence, so to say.
And
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go on, Ramin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point that, yeah, that's you see. So when I started the pro life position, I said that we start to define that personhood when we can, for example, kill that person morally. And sometimes the argument that we have on its own is sometimes it's leads to strange results. And for example, if we look only at consciousness and these levels, I believe you will get to these strange results that you can kill someone who's even asleep. You know, they're not self-conscious. They don't have any. We can even kill them in a like a painless way, and or in cases of even reversible coma, they're in a coma, we can kill them. But when we see that, okay, we have these strange results, and then we add another layer on top of that to the definition of that personhood, we say, okay, no, this is not sufficient. We have to have something more to it. And that's that they have to have something before that. If they have something before that, then they somehow keep that personhood because now they've had something in the past, they've had these kind of interests, and that carries them along. And I believe that that's again something arbitrary, because why not look into the future? Because we can also do that. We can define the same thing in terms of future, saying, okay, if someone is unconscious but is in a reversible coma, the reason that we should not kill it is because that person will have an interest in life when they come back to consciousness. And I believe that even so, this symmetry breaker, I believe first is an arbitrary thing. Why should we care about past or future? We're looking at the state that they are in right now. They don't have any interest right now. They're in this coma state. They don't feel pain. We can kill them painlessly. They don't have that level of sentience. So it should be fine, right? And that addition of past and future is to me is arbitrary. And even if I wanted to add a layer, I would actually add the future. And I can support that by giving, for example, a thought experiment. Imagine that you're working in a hospital, and then you see like a 5-year-old baby girl on the doorstep of the hospital, and she's unconscious. She's in a coma state, right? Now, by this viewpoint, because the hospital does not know whether she had a moment of experience in before, they're not sure whether this is actually a person. Should be, I mean, how much should we care for her, right? But the hospital would start taking care of her. But I believe the hospital will take care and put resources on that child, not because she might have had something in the past to make her a person. Rather, we're putting effort because she might have something in the future. And this is confirmed by the fact that if the baby comes to gain consciousness and comes to self-consciousness, becomes sentient, the hospital will be, yes, like our resources was not wasted, right? But in that view, the hospital would never know, because they never knew whether they actually saved a person or just a living thing. You see, so in my perspective, it's either something that leads to strange results, and then we add this layer of arbitrary choice, which again, for me, does not work to satisfy.
I think in that example you gave of the young girl on the doorstep of the hospital, I think the reason that they would assume that she's going to have a future that they want to help her realize is because they're making certain assumptions about her. So I don't know, in your thought experiment, how old you're assuming she is, but let's say she's, I don't know, 4 years old. If they see a 4-year-old girl on the on the doorstep, they're making an assumption there that that 4-year-old girl has had a life up to that point and she's only temporarily unconscious for some degree. And so they realize that her personhood has already been established and can be re-established. If they came to see her on the doorstep and next to her was a sign saying, this child has never been conscious in any way for whatever reason, I'm simply placing her here because I want to get rid of her body, they would have a very different perception of it.
Yes,
So
of course. Yes, sorry.
if it was clarified to them that she had never been sentient or conscious in any way, then I think they would have a very different perception of that girl. The only reason they're assuming that there is a future that's worthwhile pursuing is because they make the assumption that she's already had a past which has established personhood and this sort of stuff.
Yes.
I had another point, but did you want to say anything?
Yes, I wanted to say that I already had that in mind, and that was also the point I was trying to make. That it's true that the hospital, for example, would make that assumption, but there is a probability in place. They would be like, okay, we're not 100% sure, but let's go with that. So I understand that even on that position, or like pro-choice position, it would make sense to take her in because she might be a person, so we should take care of it. But the problem is that when you look at it in terms of, for example, a cost benefit analysis for the hospital, they would not take that probability into account. They would not be like, okay, like there's this amount of chance that she might be a person, so that outweighs the benefit. I'm saying that they completely are ignorant of the past, rather they're actually looking into the future. You see, so that's the point, because if she gains consciousness, the probability that she might have been conscious on the doorstep does not change for the hospital, because they would never know whether she had something in the past or not. But I believe when she gains consciousness, the reaction of the hospital shows that they were actually looking into the future. You see, so to me, it makes sense to break that symmetry by looking into the future, not to the past.
That future interest is a derivative of past interest. Had she not had any interest in the past, in living, in continuing to live, like she was not conscious at all, assuming that she would have a future interest is not a very reasonable assumption. If she
And
had
sorry, go on.
developed an interest in the past, that derives from that, your future interest is actually derived.
And to add something on top of that, the future interest is being derived from the past interest. But if we are to assume that it is not being derived from the past interest at all, and it will come into existence once we bring her back to life or whatever, then is this not equivalent to creating a whole new person? Because we're separating the past life from the future life. And so actually, as antinatalists, would we not all be opposed to bringing her back to life? Because it would essentially be, for all intents and purposes, bringing a new being into existence.
And that's why I'm against it, because in a pro-life position, no, she would always have been a person. You see, so that
Right.
before and after wouldn't matter.
But
She's a human being, so she would be a person.
Sorry, Tejas, were you going to?
no, I was just going to say that it looks absurd, sort of, that 4-year-old, we are letting her down. But it looks absurd because we have a bias towards an assumption that that 4-year-old had lived for 4 years in a sentient
Yeah.
existence. But as Lawrence described, that no, she was never conscious, she was never sentient, and then after coming out of coma, she is going to be sentient. We are just extending those 9 months to 4 years. There's no, or in fact, 28 weeks to 4 years. There's no real difference in here. We're creating a new person.
And sorry, Ramin, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to. So, in case of the coma case that we're now thinking about, these hypothetical situations, like, so the guy goes into a coma and loses all the interest that I had before that, and she might have something in the future. Then that future will not have any value, I guess, according to you, because he or she has lost all the interest that she had in the past. She doesn't know anything right now. She's in a coma. She might come to life in 9 months, but that future does not have any impact at our decision, because that future only has value if she's had something in the past. Is that correct? They just
Yeah, I think this comes down to two things. The first one is the thing I mentioned when I put a question to Tejas about the potential for sentience. So I think there are two reasons you could value that future coming to being. The first is from your position, Ramin. If you value the individual not based on sentience, but you value them based on being an independent human being in terms of they have a unique genome, etc. But sentience doesn't necessarily have to be established. But you would value them to such a degree where you would value them before sentience is established, and you would help them achieve sentience because you value that individual. So you could value them in terms of that, or you could value them because you value the potential for sentience, as the guy who I was talking at this debate club, like I told you about. I think the reason that we differ is because, and I don't want to speak for Tejas, but I believe we're maybe coming at it from the same perspective, is that we don't value the human genome or the independent unique genome in the same way you do. We place our emphasis on sentience. And I don't think, at least personally for me, I don't really put value on the potential for sentience when that being has never been sentient before. They don't exist at this point. So for me, it's simply bringing them into existence. And obviously, as an antinatalist, that's what I'm against. I don't know, Tejas, would you share a similar thought on that, or do you think there is some value in the potential for sentience?
Just to be clear here,
sorry, go on.
even I don't put any value on the potential here.
Yeah, no. I was distinguishing your view from that view. This is the view of that guy I was talking to at the debate club.
I just want to put slightly in different words in a question what Lawrence is saying. Ramin, if I'm saying your name right, I'm sorry if I'm not.
No, it's okay.
You were saying that that is zygote a correct word? That zygote is valuable in and of itself. It has an intrinsic value which should be preserved. Is that a correct way to say that?
Yes, true. Because it's a continuum. It's the same value that I have right now and the same value that I had when I was 2 years old. The zygote is my beginning stage of development, basically.
Correct. So this independent zygote, not you when you were a zygote, but a zygote which is existing, and we're deciding whether to abort that or not, is, when you say it's valuable, what I want to understand is it is valuable for whom? Can a value exist without somebody valuing it, or without it being valuable for someone?
Not necessarily. It would be value for that zygote, basically, but not for someone else. As if it's the same value that my life has.
So how is that different from any other molecule? It's a molecule, right? It's a 6-foot
It's an
long molecule.
it's an alive animal. It's an organism. It's an alive organism of Homo sapiens.
I'm referring to the first stage of fertilization, where you have a full form DNA, and it's a single cell at the moment. And we can call it organism, animal, that's okay, I don't disagree with that. But my point is, its definition is that 6-foot long information in that 6-foot long molecule. That's the DNA sequence, that's the information which is actually defining all of this. So if we are saying that it is valuable for itself,
Yes,
it's a molecule. So why are we not saying any other molecule is valuable for itself, but this particular molecule?
Yeah, it's well, that's the difference. So it's not first of all, it's not a molecule. It's a cell, and the difference is, again, that this cell is a living organism, and we can differ the cell, a living organism, for example, with a molecule of water, for example, and we can put them in different categories. And that's what biology tells us, that when you have that zygote, now you have an animal. It's an alive animal of the species that we can categorize as Homo sapien, that is a human being.
Can I just want to hone in on a specific detail, make a clarification, because I think maybe you two are talking past each other somewhat. Because so when Tejas is saying, and Tejas, if you weren't saying this, let me just reformulate it then. But my interpretation of what Tejas was saying was that you have this single-celled organism at this point, right? And you're placing value on that. My interpretation of what Tejas was saying is, why would you value that over any other cell? So, for example, one of the cells that make up my eye or make up my forearm, like an individual muscle cell, why do you place value on that specific cell? Would you have the same concern for a muscle cell? If we would isolate one muscle cell from my arm, put it on a table and squash it, would you have the same concern for that cell?
Well, of course not, because again, a human cell, one human cell, would not be an alive animal that can basically replicate and grow into another human being. And that the difference is that the zygote is basically who I am. And there is an interesting paper by Alexander Proust. It's called "Once I Was a Fetus." That it says, okay, for those who say that the zygote or the fetus is not a person, that basically what it means is that we have an animal over there, we have another animal here, and we're saying that that animal is not me. So the question is, what happens to that animal? Because that's a human being, by definition. That's a human being. What happens to that human being? It's a cell, it's dividing, it's growing. And if I'm not that, then, and he in this paper, he calls it Bob. And he says, okay, what happens to Bob? What happens to that animal? Does he go out? Because the cells and everything, the material body that we have right now, and it's fascinating, but everything comes from that one cell. So we, all three of us, once were a zygote. Right?
Couldn't you say? Sorry, Tejas, I'm just going to quickly make a point. Couldn't you say the same for a stem cell? For example, a new technology that is established and being sold on the market is lab-grown meat. Now they just take a single cell, put it in the right conditions, and allow it to multiply. Now, for all intents and purposes, that has the same characteristics as an individual human cell in the form of a zygote. It's a living organism. It can replicate and divide in the right conditions, but it's not sentient.
Will it turn into a sentient being in the end?
No, but you said you don't value the potential for sentience, and that would be putting emphasis on the potential for sentience.
No, it's not potential. It's just the category of that thing. You see, so when you say that I have a cell that if I let it grow, it will turn into a cat, then that zygote was a cat. It was not a human being. So when I have a zygote that turns into a human being, that's who I am. Okay, so that thing that develops into something else that obviously has the value as that thing that it develops into.
But I think the reason that you're valuing it is because it will become who I am, which is a sentient being, right?
Not necessarily, because again, as I said, my viewpoint, I understand that it's strange to say that one cell is a person. I understand the absurdity of the position, but the problem is that if I put that aside, I cannot make any consistent viewpoint here. Now, you suggested some of them. You said sentient. You said, okay, at this point and that point. But to me, those are all absurd conclusions. So to me, the only possible one, the least absurd conclusion here, is to say that the zygote is also the same thing as me. I'm a person. I was a person when I was 1 year old. I was a person when I was a fetus in the womb. I was a person when I was a zygote. I was once a zygote, and that's the same thing. And I don't expect that my value for life changes based on my stage of development.
So you're saying potential for being a human being, not potential for being a sentient being. That's what
I'm
the
not
main
talking
point.
about potential at all here. We have a human being at the moment of conception, and we have a person at the moment of conception. There's no potential here.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Lawrence.
And the reason that
you
I'm
finish
saying
your
that
thought.
it's a human being is because, well, I was there, I was that.
Oh, okay. I get it. So it's just a sequence of development, but you have been a
Yeah.
human being since you were a one cell. That's what
Yes,
the
a person.
definition of
Yes,
human being is.
yes.
Before I ask the main question, can I ask, is it only human beings that your views apply for?
That's a very interesting position, and going to other animals is very easier from a pro-life position, because if you start to value even cells that do not have any sentient, then what makes it different from we have like chimpanzees that are much more sentient than a fetus, for example. I'm not really sure on that side. I believe that it should be applied to other animals too, if you
What
want
about
if you want to
plants?
stay away from speciesism.
What about plants?
Again, these are the issues that you have to take into account. And I guess the way that it should be resolved in the end is, again, what are we basing the value on? What is exactly the thing that we're basing the value on? So when we say that human being life has a value, is it something intrinsic to it that only applies to human being? Because that's also viewed that we say, okay, human life or person is important, a human life is valuable, but for example, a cow's life or a cat's life does not have value, period. Or is it because we are driving that value from some underlying principles like the sentient or the ability to feel pain or potential memories and bonds and whatever? And then that complicates the issue. Then you can see, okay, it can be applied to dogs. Okay, if it cannot be applied to that, why not trees, for example? And that's an issue that I'm still not sure on that. How to see that. I would basically, again,
I
what is the logical conclusion of this?
yeah, I asked that because once you take sentience out of the equation, then whether it's animal, human being, or plant, a cell could be a giant sequoia tree. You can say that, right? A cell can be a
Yes.
plant. And then if you're saying a cell is valuable for itself,
Yeah, yeah, I
that
understand that,
kind
but
of
that's why
becomes.
exactly I keep insisting on the consistency. You see, so I wouldn't say that. I don't want to bring in assumptions to say that even, hey, human life is valuable, or a cow's life is valuable. All I'm saying is a consistency. I'm saying that if we are valuing an adult human life, then to me the only consistent view is to value a zygote. If you're not valuing the life of a tree, then okay, we shouldn't value the zygote of a tree. If we wouldn't call it
Mm,
zygote, but we wouldn't call it the zygote. I'm just looking for a consistency. So even if
mm.
someone comes along and says, you know what, I don't have any moral basis, I don't care about human life at all, then I would say, okay, then you shouldn't care about the zygote either.
So, Tejas, did you have anything further? Do you want to finish your thought, or?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
So I was going to ask. So you're starting from the. So you're trying to maintain consistency, but you're
Mhm.
starting from the position of, I value an adult human life. Then the question comes: why do we value an adult human life? Because I think for me and Tejas, it's sentience. So, for example, um, if we come across a dead body, this dead body is, it's been dead for several days. It's still an adult human. There may even still be some parts of the body that are still alive, and they're taking time to die, but they're brain dead. We wouldn't value that human because they're not sentient. Um, I think, yeah. So why do you value that adult human?
Yeah, again, that's a completely different question. That where does that value come from? And what you said also, what defines basically death? Because what we are valuing is the life of a human being, right? So when that life stops being, that's a different question. Like when death happens, when you die by brain, or when your body completely shuts down as a living organism, defined by biology, then that's when death is happening. Um, but yet again, that's the only reason that I say that we value is because it's just, I believe we are living in a society that we all agree that human life is valuable. I really don't have yet an answer to
Mm,
say, okay, why we are valuing human life. The only thing that I know is that I assumed here that all three of us value adult human beings.
mm, mm. Okay, cool. And do you value an adult human being to the same degree as you value a zygote, or do you think there's a difference in how much you value them?
um, Again, that's something that if we want to we have two options. Again, everything for me is the consistency is the most important thing. If you want to bring in value or degrees of value, then okay, let's do that, and then we should allow for example, reducing the value of a certain race, reducing the value of certain skin color, And then we will have all these different problems. It will open up to many different problems. I'm not saying that that's the wrong position, but I'm just saying that we should allow for all those discussions also to develop. Or we can just take the value to say, hey, this is just a constant thing. You're a human being. You have value. My life, a child, a fetus, all the same. Let's just all agree on that.
I think that really comes down to where you get the value for human beings from, because if someone values human beings because they have the capacity to suffer because they're sentient, then it would make sense to value all races equally because we all have the same value, the same capacity to suffer. But we wouldn't value a zygote because that zygote doesn't have the capacity to suffer. I've got one last question, and then maybe we can pivot to someone else being in the hot seat, because I think Ramin's been in the hot seat for quite a while now.
I'm burning
So
here.
my one last question is, if you value a zygote and an adult human, but it's not based on sentience, so they maintain their value from not being sentient, so before they've come into sentient being, during sentient being, what about after they leave sentient being? So when someone dies, would you still value them as the same as you would a zygote or an adult human being if, for example, they die but somehow, you know, they're not conscious in any way, they have no perception, but the cells of their body somehow were able to maintain some sort of they're able to be alive. There's just no
Vegetative
sentience
state,
at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a question that I was thinking about too. And if we take this extreme position to say that okay, life begins at conception, then life will end at the moment that we biologically say that we no longer have an alive organism. You see, so that body is disintegrating. So it's not something that is functioning as an organism anymore. That would be death. But then if we take that position that we're looking into the future, whether they're going to have a future of life, then that will resolve this problem, because then you will still have a fetus and zygote as a person, but then the moment that we are absolutely sure that this person is not going to have any more sentient or anything like that, then we can basically pronounce them dead, even though biologically they're still a human being. But I'm myself a little bit more inclined toward the first position. That's again because to me that feels more natural and consistent. So I would say that even if you have someone in a vegetative state, they're not going to come back to life. You have to let the body just live, and killing it would be again a case of killing a person.
Cool. Ramin, do you have any questions for? I think Tejas is the only one that hasn't had a question to him yet. Do you have a?
Just one point. I don't actually. Yes, I did have a question for Tejas, but I already talked about it a couple of times. My position is that if I understand that if you take, for example, sentience, then we can have a different definition of personhood. And the only reason that I don't do that is because I believe it leads to these kind of inconsistent results that I feel absurd. And I also mentioned my main problem with these kind of ideas is that what if we extend that to adulthood outside the womb, and then there things just start to get a little bit shady, because now you're talking about killing a 10-year-old because they never had any experience before. They have this kind of disease that it will just take so long for them to come into sentience and infanticide, and these things again I still cannot make a fully developed consistent way of looking at it. But I don't have any specific question to, because I already asked them, I believe.
Cool. So I have a question for Tejas to put him in the hot seat, get him simmering for a bit. So my question is, and we have it, Ramin has actually brought it up already, but I want to sort of refine it a bit. So the pro-death position, if we just look at it in the form of before sentience has arisen, right? Do you not think this resembles the case, for example, when someone has been knocked out? So not when they're asleep, because when you're asleep, you maybe dream and stuff like that. But let's say someone has sustained some sort of they've received some sort of injury to the head that's just knocked them unconscious for maybe half an hour. It's not a severe injury or anything, but they're unconscious. They don't perceive anything. It's not like they're dreaming. They're simply unconscious for half an hour. Them waking back up could be interpreted by some people as coming into being again. Now, once they do come back into consciousness, they do then re-establish continuity. Well, it depends on how hard they've been knocked over the head, but they do re-establish continuity. But whilst they are unconscious, they are, for all intents and purposes, essentially not perceiving, don't really have any active interests. So does a pro-death position, to be consistent, not result in you being in favor of essentially, once someone is knocked out, opportunistically euthanizing them?
Right. Yeah. So if I understand this correctly, the assumption here is they are unconscious. They are unconscious in such a state that when they come back out of unconsciousness, when they become conscious again, they will have some kind of continuity in terms of their memory and consciousness from the past.
Yeah, maybe if you want to deal with both. So there
Yeah.
are circumstances when they regain continuity, and there are some when they wake up and they suddenly know Spanish and they're as smart as Einstein or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And should we also not consider the interests of other people around that person, the
Yeah,
family?
exactly. Forget
Okay.
those external
Okay.
things. Yeah,
We're just talking about one person here.
yeah.
So in the case where they will become conscious again and then experience some kind of continuity, that we touched upon that point that their future interests are derived from their past interests. And the idea, I mean, to me, why I don't see any inconsistency in not killing that person when that person is unconscious is because the action has to be based on whether we are harming that person or not.
Mm.
That is based on whether that we are causing some suffering to that person or not. And one of the general assumption is for us to harm somebody, they need to know that they are being harmed. But as I said, that is not an essential condition. You can be harmed without you being knowing that you are being harmed. If that is the case, then not respecting your interests to continue life in the past, which you held, and then stopping those interests is still a harm to you, even though you don't know that you're being harmed at the moment. And therefore, it would not be in line with killing that person. This is consistent with the view of antinatalism, where we say that antinatalism is only opposing creation of new sentient life. It is not about seizing existing sentient life. And that existing sentient life might be unconscious at the moment, but since it had existed, had developed interest in continuing the life, we ought not to seize that. As from the antinatalist perspective, you can have another perspective where euthanasia or right to die and so on,
Mm.
but that sort of negates the interest of continuing, because if that person wanted to do suicide anyway, then it goes into the realm of whether we should rather respect that wish of that person. So that's a different point. But so the other part where they don't experience the continuity, we are essentially creating a new person, although the body is same. And this is, as per my knowledge, this is a very theoretical case. But
Mm.
nonetheless, if we are going to create a full new person, then we ought to not create them, and we ought to euthanize them when they are unconscious. That
Mm.
leads to that conclusion, and we need to stick with it. That's what I think.
Mm.
Can I add?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, just to point out, because Tejas says that there is no inconsistency. I wanted to say that what I'm thinking that leads to that inconsistency is that, to me, when I see that person knocked out, and then you see, okay, they can be harmed without knowing that. To me, is exactly the same case when a fetus cannot know that it's being harmed because it's still in the same state of not having sentient, but then we're allowed to kill it. And if we add this extra layer, then say, okay, no, but there's a difference. That person has a personhood, has an interest, something in addition. But the point is that from my perspective, on the material level, there's absolutely nothing different. I can say, okay, they are exactly the same state. The physics is exactly the same. The state of consciousness is exactly the same. The state of not being able to know that they're being harmed is exactly the same. So there's nothing extra to it. But then there's this kind of supernatural layer added to that person. Oh no, this one has this additional thing, being a person. But and then you're like, okay, why? Because something happened in the past. Yeah, but where is that at that moment? Where is that in the material parts of that person? It's not in the sentient because it's the same sentient. It's not in the bodily function. It's the same bodily function. It's not in not being able to know because it's exactly the same thing. See, so that a super added layer brings a kind of arbitrariness to the problem for me, that you add that layer by looking in the past, and I say, okay, why can't I add that layer looking into the future? You see, so that's just wanted to explain why I see a problem with that. And I guess Lawrence was also wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to respond.
Yeah.
So, Tejas, sorry, please.
The reason I'm saying there is no addition in distinguishing these two cases is, um, we took an example of, would you say you are harmed if your partner is cheating on you, but you don't know, she or he never tells you, you never come to know that your partner has cheated on you, and you are for monogamous relationship? That's the assumption here. Are you harmed or not harmed?
Yeah, we agree both that we are harmed on that.
Right? So the condition that you need to know that you're harmed is not an essential condition.
True, we both agree on
There is
that.
no addition we are doing here. That condition exists in the definition of harm itself. Right? And that is the difference between these two cases. In the case of zygote, there was no interest at all. There is nobody who could be harmed. There has never been anybody who could be harmed. In the case of coma, there was somebody who we can say will be harmed.
But you see, there's a bigging of the question happening there, because when you say that the person, the zygote is not being harmed because it doesn't have any interest, okay, and then to say that the adult person uh, has an interest. So when they're, even though they don't know that they're being harmed, they're still being harmed, right? But the very reason that we say that that person has an interest and that person, the other one, does not have an interest, is exactly because of the interest that you say that they had in the past. You see what I mean?
No,
So
I,
basically, if
what I'm saying is, I want to stress on the change in the tense here. The person in the coma had an interest. Zygote never had any interest at all.
okay, so why having an interest in the past translates to have an interest right now? You see, because when you make the case of your girlfriend cheating on you, that's a harm happening to your interest right now, even if you don't know it, right? So if I had an interest in the past, why does that translate to me right now? From what I see, I'm the same person and I'm in the same state of consciousness. Where does that extra interest is coming from that you're robbing me of without knowing me?
Yeah. So, going back to where, why don't you kill yourself is the question antinatalists are asked. And we always say
That was
that,
a very plot twist. I mean,
yeah, so
suddenly something became really dark. Why don't you kill
sorry.
yourself?
We always say, and that is true, that antinatalism is against seizing, or it is not opposed. How should I say? It is not for seizing existing life, right? What does that, at least to me, what it means is, it is not for seizing existing sentient life. What that means in turn is that it is not for seizing the life which has an interest in continuing that life.
Correct.
And that and I'm not saying this is just my thought. Like, David Benatar bases this on four kinds of interests in the chapter on abortion, and the last two are this interest to continue life, and another one is self-aware interest. So this interest is what antinatalism is not opposed to, or they're not for seizing that interest. They are only opposed to creating new life, meaning creating new sentient life, meaning creating new life which will have interest in living. And that's why the difference, once we are here, we have an interest in continuing life. Before we come here, we don't have an interest, so we should not create that interest. So the difference in coma case was there had been an interest, which will continue if we bring that person out of coma. So if we don't do that, we are sort of seizing that interest, which is what is antinatalism is not for. Whereas in case of zygote, there was never an interest to start with. We are creating a new interest in life, although maybe after 28 weeks that comes into reality.
Ramin, do you have anything to respond, or can I
Uh,
move us on?
no, I guess already mentioned, but it would be just a reiteration of
Cool.
what I said
Yeah.
before. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, because we're coming up to 2 hours, I wanted to start rounding things off, but I realize, so I've asked all the questions I had. I think, Ramin, you've asked the questions you had. Tejas, I realize we haven't, asked you, what sort of questions you have. So if you've got any questions for the pro-choice or the pro-life position, please, the floor is yours. And then once you're done, then we'll close off.
Yeah, I'll just do for pro-choice because I think I did ask for pro-life.
Cool. Yeah,
The
go
the,
for it.
the thing with pro-choice is I don't know. We don't have a real pro-choice person here, but what about the cases where a mother goes into an abortion clinic and says that she wants to abort because the baby is going to be a girl? It's her choice. It's her bodily autonomy. Should that choice be respected?
Right. Okay. So I think prior to sentience, I think um, there would be no issue in terms of any harm being done to the fetus. I think if if we talk about the cases where I was saying before, I think a reasonable pro-choice position will say that it's okay to abort in the sort of earliest stages of sentience, right? Um, Essentially, the action is the same, but the motivation is different, is the key thing you're getting at here, right? So I think if you're looking at it from a consequentialist point of view, the consequences of the action are the same, regardless of the intent. Now, there may be wider societal consequences that come as a result of that, because it would be the lessening of the value of females than males. And I don't think that, I think that would be an arbitrary thing to do. I think that would be a wrong thing to do. One, because it would lead to worse consequences for women than men, in a way that's unfair. So if we're just looking at intent, I think when it comes to the impact on the fetus, it would be the same. So I don't think there would be a difference. But if we're judging the moral character of the person, I think there would be a difference, because it wouldn't be that the interest being balanced between the mother and the fetus, I don't think would differ that much, because the interest of the mother, whether it's about not wanting a girl or not wanting the inconvenience of a pregnancy, the interest could be held just as strongly. So the intensity of the interest in play here is, again, I don't think is the relevant thing. I think the relevant thing is the values of the person. And so I think what comes into question is not the impact of the abortion or the ethical balancing of the interests. It's the values of the person being called into question. And I think we can condemn, even if we don't condemn the abortion, we can condemn the motivations for it, because we're recognizing that the person is disvaluing females over males. And we want to call that into question, because that is arbitrary, because sex is not a morally relevant characteristic. And so I think the immorality of the abortion would come from the motivations and the values of the person, because we would disagree with those, rather than the the impact of the abortion itself, if you get what I mean. If I was to think of an analogy, maybe there could be an analogy in that, say we say we have a coma patient, and there is they're in a vegetative state, but there is some potential in the future that they may, you know, they may come back to being a fully fledged person. I think it would be widely seen that there would be a difference between that person cutting off life support because they think, on balance, that person likely isn't going to come back, and I'm in a bad financial position, so I can't maintain the finances for keeping that person alive. And then a rich person who can keep the finances alive, can finance keeping that person alive, but they just don't care about that person. The impact would be the same for the person. They're in a coma, being terminated without the possibility for coming out of the coma, but we would judge those actions very differently based on the values of the person making the decision, if you get what I mean. And I think it would probably be similar in the case of abortion. Is that a reasonable response, do you think?
Although I'm not satisfied, that might be
Yeah.
because how, like, I would, from an antinatalist perspective, I would say you are discriminating against boys. It's a very controversial thing to
Right,
say.
okay.
But no, but that's a very difficult question, I think, from a pro-choice perspective. A similar
Yeah.
case would be that, let's say there's somebody who you don't like, or even let's say a stray dog on street, and you either euthanize that dog because you want to save that dog from suffering, or you euthanize that dog because you don't like that dog. So the
Right,
action
yeah.
is going to result in the same result, but your motivations are completely opposite. So
Yeah.
there's an analogy there, I think, but it's a very hard question, I think. The other one I
Yeah, yeah.
wanted to ask was most
Sorry,
of the.
Tejas, just before you go on, one thing I want to clarify again is I'm trying to answer these questions the best I can from the position I'm trying to do. I don't necessarily
Yes,
think these things, but anyway, go.
absolutely.
Just
Yes.
because I know some bastard out there is gonna,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they should have come here then if they wanted to defend pro-choice.
yeah. It's sad it didn't work out, but yeah.
The other one was that most of the pro-choice positions comes from the conflicts of interest between mother and the baby.
Yeah.
Right? If we eliminate this interest altogether, let's say that tomorrow technologically it is possible to grow an embryo to full term to baby
Yes.
outside of the womb in a laboratory, would then pro-choice position would completely be eliminated? Like there's no point in giving a choice. Like what choice are we saying then?
So I don't think it would be eliminated. I think the balancing of interest between the mother's bodily autonomy and the child's bodily autonomy would be eliminated, but there would still be other competing interests, in terms of, you would have the same interests of the fetus and the baby, because they've just simply changed the carrier, right, from a biological carrier to a mechanical or whatever carrier. Um, the interests of the mother, however, only some of them would be removed from the equation, which would be the bodily ones. However, there would still be some interests of the mother, and in this case, actually the father as well. So the father and the mother would be the same in the equation here, in that they would still have to take care of that child once the child is born. And so there is still interest there in terms of, are they financially, mentally in the right place to be able to do that? Maybe having a child would completely ruin their life. Now, it's slightly more complicated when you remove the baby to an exo womb, because if the baby was growing inside the mother, as as happens, as is traditional, that could have resulted from an accident, right? Or it could have resulted as a circumstance of rape. However, when you so in that case they wouldn't have intended to have gotten pregnant, right? Whereas if you talk about using an exo womb, that can't come around accidentally. Like the couple would have had to intentionally commission a child to have been grown in that exo womb, right? So it's not directly analogous because the intentions may be different. So, for example, when often many pro-life people will say that if a mother is raped, then they can maintain the right to abort because there is an unnecessary imposition being put on them, not just biologically in terms of maintaining the pregnancy, but also once the child is born, they are having to now take care of a whole new human being when they didn't sign up to it, which would be the equivalent of me going up to someone and saying, here's an old person, you now have to look after them until they die, if you get what I mean. Like it's putting a burden on someone without their consent. So I think it wouldn't eliminate the pro-choice position, but I think it would change it and it would probably weaken it, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, I have lots of questions, but I think that's good. That's enough.
Cool. Okay, cool. Does anyone have any closing off thoughts that they have before I properly close off?
I mean, I would like to summarize, I guess.
Cool. Okay. Yes. Ramin, do you want to do a summary, and then Tejas, you'll do a summary?
Yeah, I guess just to recap and just restate the pro-life position and my position, because we talked about a lot of things and there might be some confusion. So yeah, again, for me, it's about just finding some sufficient conditions that defines the personhood, and I'm not able to find it. And to me, like I heard different options during this conversation, and again, some of them lead to these kind of results, strange results, and some of them are arbitrary. Again, in a sense that the concept of personhood or interest seems to be floating above the conditions of that person. Like they had something in the past, they gained something, and that interest is like a soul just going with them, even if they lose their sentient, even if they lose their experience of pain, or even if they're not aware of their interest, that just hovers above them. And to me, that's a little bit arbitrary, and it signals to me that instead of the direction they're moving, it's not that we start from some principles and leading to the conclusion that, hey, abortion is bad. It looks like as if you're going the other way around. We say, okay, the abortion, we want to justify that, and now how we can basically drive. I'm not saying that that's what Tejas is doing, but just how it feels like to me, that with kind of arbitrariness of some of the choices that we make. Yeah, but in general, it was very interesting conversation.
Nice. Tejas, do you want to give any closing thoughts?
Well, I can summarize pro-death view in very one sentence. You have a duty to abort before sentience is achieved. Period. But I also want to say that this is a serious topic. We might have mansplained some of the things without understanding men's perspective.
I was going to say that because someone's going to comment like, how is it like three guys sitting around talking about women's choice?
Yeah, so that risk is there, and we know, and we're trying to mitigate that risk as much as possible, but that can happen. I have, listened to some of the doctors who do abortions in Africa and other countries or poorer areas in the world. And they say that if a woman wants to have abortion, she will get it no matter what. She will not do all these calculations of sentience, interests, values. And most probably the reason is she is in such a situation that she can't afford to do those calculations. So all these philosophical things are in one way good, but we need to acknowledge that there are some dire practical situations out there which we just cannot get perspective of ourselves. So
yeah, no, exactly. And like I said at the start, I was expecting we'd stay on the moral level predominantly, but actually we may have practical views about the legality of the situation that the viewers may not assume, right? But that's another question for another day. But thank you for mentioning that. Tejas. So just to reiterate to people, like we did have women coming on this panel. It just didn't work out. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but yeah, it just didn't work out, and we've been trying to have this for literally like maybe over a month now. So we just didn't want to cancel again. So we went ahead. Hopefully, everyone watching feels that each of the views has been best represented as they can. If anyone watching thinks, they can represent the pro-life, pro-choice, or pro-death view better, please put it in the comments. If you have a completely different view, maybe there's a fourth view on abortion, or a fifth, or a sixth, or whatever, put those in the comments. Like, I'd be really interested to see the wide variety and diversity of views on this topic from people in the antinatalist community. I think it would be really interesting. Yeah, I wanted to thank you both for bearing with all the organizing of this and finally coming on as well and sharing your thoughts. Because one, not everyone is willing to speak about topics that are often as controversial and as heated as this. And we've done it in a very civil way, which I really appreciate. And yeah, I appreciate both of you be willing to be in the hot seat for a period of it as well. So yeah, thank you both for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please put your thoughts in the comments below. And yeah, that is it. Thank you both for coming on.
Yeah,
Thanks, Lawrence, for organizing this.